What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, President Biden just gave a very important interview, which gives us pretty much all of the questions that you need to know about here about what's going on between us, Russia, and China, and Ukraine, and money. Pretty much answers most of the questions that we need to know here. And he actually has some pretty alarming answers to, well, all of it here. So let me show you guys this interview here and this answers, and then we'll talk about it here. You guys can let me know your thoughts here on this. So let's jump right in, and you guys can let me know if this is what you expect and what we expect going forward here. So let's jump right in. Thanks so much for liking and sharing these videos. Here we go.
Mr. President, you know, as we sit here today, it was 1 year ago today, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You said in Warsaw that Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. So how does this war end, and what does victory look like?
Well, that depends on what the Ukrainians decide. But here's what we have to do in the meantime. We have to put the Ukrainians in a position where they can make advances this spring and summer and move to a place where they can negotiate from a position of strength. But you know, that expression, you've heard me use it before and others, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. We're not going to dictate to them what the end result is.
When you talk about them negotiating, does that mean they get to keep Crimea and parts of the east?
That means they decide that. The Ukrainians decide that. But I could picture a circumstance where there's a transition to that. It's not all one time. Look, a year ago today, there were only 70 kilometers from the border where the Russians expected they'd come rolling down into Kyiv and own it all. They got pushed back. It didn't happen. And I think they underestimated a great deal, the Russians did.
But a reality check for the American people watching this at home tonight. Could you and I be sitting here a year from now talking about the war in Ukraine still?
Well, we could. I'm not a prognostic. I don't have a crystal ball. But look, for all the difficulty that the Ukraine has in maintaining the weaponry, having what they need, and so on and so forth, the circumstance in Russia is even worse. Russia's, they put 180,000 forces into Ukraine a year ago today, an invasion. And where are they? Where are they?
You announced another $2.5 billion in aid to Ukraine today, $113 billion now. We know the vast majority of Americans support Ukraine, but there are now many who are asking, how long can we spend like this?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure how many are asking. I know the mega crowd is. The right-wing Republicans are, talking about we can't do this. You find ourselves in a situation where the cost of walking away could be considerably higher than the cost of helping Ukraine maintain its independence.
We know the Germans are now sending tanks in after the U.S. said it would send Abrams tanks as well. But we know President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him what our seasoned military thinks he needs now. He needs tanks, he needs artillery, he needs air defense, including another HIMARS. There's things he needs now that we're sending him to put him in a position to be able to make gains this spring and this summer going into the fall.
You don't think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't need F-16s now.
Is that a never?
Look, first of all, the idea that we know exactly what's going to be needed a year, 2, 3 from now, but there is no basis upon which there is a rationale, according to our military now, to provide F-16s.
But you're not ruling it out?
I am ruling it out for now.
For now. Vladimir Putin told the Russian people this week that China's President Xi is coming to Russia, likely as early as this spring. I know the State Department and the Pentagon now have both warned China not to offer lethal military assistance to Russia in this war with Ukraine, saying the U.S. is concerned that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia. Would that cross a line for you?
Look, it's not in China's. I had a very frank conversation with President Xi this past summer on this issue. And I pointed out to him, the conversation went like this. I said, Mr. President, this is not a threat. It's just an assertion, a statement of what I think the reality is. You saw what happened when the rest of the world, Europe in particular, saw the brutality of what Putin was doing in Ukraine to the Ukrainians from Russia. And I said, without any government prodding, 600 American corporations left Russia, from McDonald's to Exxon to across the board. And I said, and if you are engaged in the same kind of brutality by supporting the brutality that's going on, I said, you may face the same consequence. I don't anticipate, we haven't seen it yet, but I don't anticipate a major initiative on the part of China providing weaponry to Russia.
But if they did, would that be crossing a line for you, Mr. President?
It would be the same line everyone else would have crossed. In other words, we impose severe sanctions on anyone who has done that.
So there would be serious consequences.
I'll let you characterize what they would be. We would respond.
I ask you all of this because there's a new report in the German newspaper Der Spiegel that the Russian military could be negotiating right now with a Chinese drone manufacturer to produce kamikaze drones for Russia. Are you aware of this? Is U.S. intelligence tracking this?
U.S. intelligence is aware of everything that's going on in this area, but I'm not going to confirm specifically what U.S. intelligence has found out or not found out.
What do you make of this Chinese peace plan floated overnight that Putin is now applauding today?
I think you answered the question. Putin's applauding it. So how could it be any good? I'm not being facetious. I'm being deadly earnest. I've seen nothing in the plan that would indicate that there is something that would be beneficial to anyone other than Russia if the Chinese plan were followed. And so the idea that China is going to be negotiating the outcome of a war that's a totally unjust war for Ukraine is just not rational.
Let me ask about U.S.-China relations in general, already strained after the Chinese spy balloon over the U.S. Let me just ask you this first. Do we know definitively yet whether or not that spy balloon was flying over the continental U.S. intentionally?
It is almost not relevant once it was over the United States.
So there's a possibility President Xi didn't know.
There is a possibility of that.
Were they surveilling the U.S. or attempting to?
That's what that balloon does, surveillance.
Let me ask you, when the balloon was shot down off South Carolina, the defense secretary placed a call to his Chinese counterpart on a line that's supposed to always be open. The Chinese did not take the call. They didn't pick up the phone. Does that trouble you?
Yes. There should be a direct open line of communications, particularly for two most powerful nations in the world, to be able to resolve anything quickly so there's not a mistake made.
The defense secretary says they still haven't had that call. How does the U.S., how does your administration fix this?
We make it clear that it's necessary for that to occur. We can't fix it.
Yeah, so think about that. So China is ignoring the U.S. government's calls when we call them about major issues directly from the White House. The White House is calling their basically internal government, and they're not responding. These are direct lines between the two governments, and China's ignoring the calls. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? I mean, this is serious here, and we have now multiple reports here that China is giving military supplies, weaponry. If you watched my previous video, I'll link you to that here. Multiple reports that China is supplying Russia with military supplies for help on the battlefield. Yeah, so if you didn't watch that video, I'll link you to that video here next, because this is pretty serious here. So will we see the type of sanctions that Russia has gotten? Will we see this push China further and further onto Russia's side? And will this lead them to team up with Russia and thus against the United States? And will this lead to further closer to a World War III type of situation? Yeah. And why isn't China answering our questions? What do they have to hide? Yeah. So, I mean, this is how major things happen. I mean, think about World War II with Japan and the tensions there, and boom, look what happened overnight with Pearl Harbor. Yeah. Ooh, all of a sudden there was a surprise attack. Yeah. So, yeah, you got to really think here about what these tensions could mean, what could happen in the future. Don't forget that we have a major world war type of situation in Russia and Ukraine with lots of other countries involved supplying things there. All pretty much all of NATO is involved with supplying munitions and money and aid to Ukraine. So it's interesting there. And now China's involved as well. Russia's involved, and of course the United States involved. And where do you see us in a year from now? Do you see the war being over? How does the war end? Or will we still be in this war? Or will it be much bigger? Will we actually be involved in the war of the United States directly? Will we be sucked into this? Yeah. The other question here is, how do we actually end the war? Yeah. So let me know your thoughts here in the comments, because things are getting a lot more high strung, high tension here. And it just seems like we're getting ever and ever closer and closer to conflict with China and Russia. And this whole Ukraine Russia war just seems like it's getting further and further from ending. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be ending anytime soon. Yeah, don't forget that Russia is starting year 2 of the war with 300 to 500,000 new troops. Yeah, so how long this could go on, you could let me know your thoughts here in the comments, but it could be a while. So I'll keep you up to date here. If you haven't yet, make sure to click the subscribe button down below to our YouTube channel. It's completely free to do so. Then click the bell icon after you subscribe so you don't miss out on new videos that come out here every day at 10 a.m., 3 p.m., and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, thanks for liking and sharing these videos with anybody that needs to hear this, and also it helps our YouTube channel. Here is some videos you can watch next. Here is the previous video I just did on the reports that just came out about China is supplying Russia with military aid. Click that if you haven't yet. And also a China jet that just almost encountered a US plane as well. So click on that video next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.